Well, the National Prosecuting Authority continues to be in the spotlight following a string of failed cases. Several high-profile cases have been bungled, including the prosecutions of the Gupta brothers, Timothy Omotoso, and the recent handling of allegations against Moroadi Cholota. This has resulted in the public seemingly losing confidence in the institution. Well, we've invited the head of the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamila Batohi, into studio to talk to us about some of these challenges. Thank you for accepting our invite and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Leanne. It's good to be here.
It's not going to be an easy conversation, and I don't think you expect it to be one, because there's a lot of criticism. In fact, I was doing research for the interview, and every article I opened had a scathing headline about the NPA with your name attached to it. How do you feel about that?
It's painful, let's put it quite frankly. You know, we've done so much of work in terms of trying to turn the NPA around post-state capture, that these few cases that you mentioned as having been bungled by the NPA, which I disagree with very strongly, there have been setbacks, and I can deal with each one of those cases and explain to you why they were, except in the one matter, in the Omotoso matter, where the prosecutors were criticized and where we are investigating to understand exactly what happened. Apart from that one, I can deal with all of the other matters, and they're less than a dozen, that has actually led to this very, very severe criticism on the NPA. Yeah. So, you know, in any country where there's such high levels of crime, you know, you do get, you know, people blamed for this. And at this point in time, Shamila Batohi, as the head of the NPA, is being seen as the face of failure. Yeah. But I would urge the public to look at every one of those cases and interrogate what exactly happened in those matters, and then come to a conclusion about whether there certainly have been setbacks, and I don't want to underplay that. There have been major setbacks for the institution, but we're dealing with them. Some of the cases are on appeal, others there are investigations into, and there will be consequence management.
Yeah, well, one would hope, and I think you can understand why South Africans and the public are not happy at the moment, because I know we talk to the fact that these are high-profile cases, and there are many, many other successful cases that the NPA prosecute, but these cases are in the public domain. They are there. I want to go back all the way to when you came in, and there was this great optimism that suddenly state capture was going to be held accountable for what had happened to this country. 5 years later, no Guptas, no extradition, no accountability, a 3,000-page document not from the Zondo Commission, and we're still waiting for anything to come out of that.
So look, well, it's actually in my 6th year. I came back to South Africa from the International Criminal Court with myself a great sense of optimism, because we were on a new drawn trajectory, the rule of law. You know, President Ramaphosa came on a rule of law ticket, and of course that is what I've been fighting for all my life. And I came back to South Africa to help rebuild this country, and the devastation that state capture, corruption had actually led to. Lack of basic infrastructure, lack of sanitation, housing, schools. You know, that's what is the face of corruption in this country. And of course, at this point in time, I reflect on, you know, the work that we've done to ensure accountability for that. Yes, there aren't many completed cases, but there are several cases in court. The IDAC, which was recently made permanent, has enrolled over 33 cases that are in court at various stages. And then we've got to look at what the challenges are in court, in the court process. So I think it's important for us as a country to sit back and have a very, very strong reflection on why is it so difficult to prosecute these cases in this country when you have people that are so committed to doing its work. So I think unless we have that very deep reflection on what are the challenges that we are facing in prosecuting these matters, is it structural in terms of the NPA? Is it resourcing? Is it salary dispensations? Is it skills? And in many respects, it's a bit of all of that. So we've done a lot of work. The IDAC just became permanent last year, and they've been recruiting. But the challenges we face is that the salary dispensation in the NPA is not a good one to actually retain those very highly specialized skills. And so we find that as we're recruiting, we're losing staff members to other government departments like the SIU or SARS that can offer, higher salaries. So in as much as a lot of work is happening, I think we really need to have very careful reflection on what are the challenges to dealing with these kinds of cases in South Africa, and then to really address those systemic challenges. Otherwise, we are going to continue to struggle in this regard.
So I want to break it down into each of these cases, but I know that you've been really speaking about them and going into them, whether it be the Cholota, Omotoso, which we will touch on. I assure viewers will go into them. But I want to fast forward to a little bit of a bomb that you dropped last night during an interview, and I'm going to linger on it for a bit because I think we as South Africans deserve answers. At the end of an interview that you did last night, you said, "I don't sleep well at night. The NPA is being infiltrated by people that do not have the public interest at heart." This is worrying. This is very worrying. What is going on? Please be honest with us.
I will be absolutely honest with the public to the extent that I can be. And I want to be open and transparent about this. I think, let me say that we are having internal challenges where some prosecutors may not be aligned to the vision of really fighting for the rule of law in this country. And this is a very, very concerning issue, as I said, that I am going to be taking up with the executive. And regrettably, I can't say anything more at this stage. But it reflects on one of the additional challenges that we're facing. In addition to all of the systemic challenges in this country, we are facing these internal challenges as well. But I hasten to add, as I did, that the majority of prosecutors in the NPA are very hardworking, skilled, aligned to the vision that the leadership has in terms of fighting for the rule of law, fighting for justice, serving victims and serving the people of South Africa. And I think we can rest assured that that is the case in the NPA. Yeah. But there are some internal challenges that I am dealing with. That is all I can say at this stage.
I understand that, but this must be coming from a very high level, and it's very hard as South Africans to not think that there's political interference here. I mean, if we look at somebody like Andrew Chauke, the fact that he's still in his position makes no sense. The fact that you don't have access to the Zondo Commission or the database there, what's going on? I mean, should this not be something that is dealt with efficiently? And I'm talking right up to the president of this country.
Sure. No, let me be very, very clear. And I want to, emphasize this. There has been no political interference at all in the work of the NPA.
Towards you, maybe. But are you sure that your staff and the prosecutors are not being influenced? Because it certainly looks that way.
Well, I can't say 100%, obviously. If those are being influenced, then no one's going to tell me about it. But I can say 100% that I have not experienced any political interference by the executive during my tenure. But, you mentioned certain DPP, and there are processes in that regard that, it's a presidential process that is ongoing. I certainly hope that those processes are fast-tracked, because it is not good to the individual concerned, and it's certainly not good for the institution. And so, there must be a process, but the president will decide on that. And then, whatever the outcome of that process is, we must accept it and move on.
Yeah.
But it cannot be hanging in this way.
No, it certainly can't, because it is an insinuation that there is a crisis. I know you're denying that there is a crisis, but the fact that you can't sleep at night because of some that have infiltrated the NPA. In fact, I'm sure you're aware of it, the DA holding a press conference this morning sometime to address what they call a deepening crisis within the NPA and the Justice, or the Department of Justice. Do you have any idea what's going to be brought out here?
I have no idea what...
Perhaps it's what you have insinuated?
No,
they're going to go public
I have no
with
idea.
it?
I have no idea what their definition of a crisis is. But what I can certainly say is, in the media there has been insinuations of a leadership crisis. There's definitely no leadership crisis in the NPA. And as far as I'm concerned, we are dealing with very challenging times. And I think we must not confuse, the issues of trying to deal with the crisis of crime in this country and a crisis in the NPA. There's no crisis in the NPA, but we have certainly got a number of challenges internally as well as within the entire criminal justice system. And if we don't sit down as a country and besides corruption, have a very hard reflection on what we need to do to address the crime crisis, we will pick on a few cases which I've called red herrings, but I hasten to add, I don't want to minimize the importance of those cases. They are very important and they've been major setbacks that we're dealing with. But you cannot pick less than a dozen cases and then say there's a crisis in the NPA. But there's certainly a crime crisis in this country, and that's what we need to address.
And none of us deny that, and that's why we look to institutions like the NPA to assist us. And then I call a crisis looking at Timothy Omotoso with a hoodie leaving the country. That for me is a crisis. A man that has been in a case since 2018, it's been dragged on, and then we hear that this was, in order to justify the handling of this case, we hear things of how it was badly treated, it didn't work out well, the first team wasn't good enough, then we had to move on. This is something you are passionate about. I mean, this is what you stand for, is gender-based violence, and what these victims went through that had the bravery to come forward, and yet he's gone.
This is one of the cases that caused me the most pain because of, as you say, I've been fighting for justice for victims of gender-based violence throughout my career. And the outcome in this case has been devastating. It's been devastating to the victims, firstly, who were brave enough to come forward in the face of a very, very powerful person. It's devastating to our general fight against sexual and gender-based violence in this country. And so there were three things that we did immediately after that decision. One was put together an external, because the prosecutors, there were two teams, that's right. First team had been removed because of allegations of improper conduct and influencing the witnesses. That team had been removed, and there's already an investigation into the conduct of that team that started in August last year. I'm expecting to get a report by mid-June this year, and depending on what that says, there will be consequence management. The team that then continued with the trial, the second team, let's call it that, the judge seriously criticized that team for example, cross-examination and other aspects. Again, we got an external team with experts in the NPA that deal with sexual and gender-based violence in our unit that specializes in this, to look at the entire transcript in order to see whether the judge's comments were justified. And if so, again, what will the consequent management be? And now we're in a process where we have decided to take this matter on appeal. And the judge has actually, started a very, I think, innovative process, which has taken us by surprise, because we requested the judge to clarify her factual findings. And in our view, this is not an application, it's a request to the judge. But the judge has requested that we prepare heads of argument, and that this is in fact done as an application before court, with the defense also responding to this. So this is the first time it's happened with regard to this kind of process. But we have to go along with this process. But it also just demonstrates the challenges in the justice system that we have to deal with in these cases.
Yeah, and that's a reality, because it may get to a point where we've got to work on an extradition, and the track record of extradition is not good. From the
well,
Guptas,
the track record of extradition is extremely good.
On the high-profile cases, and I know you don't like me highlighting those only, because there are many, and we have to confess that there has been good work done by the NPA. But when we look at the Guptas in the UAE, and we look at what happened with this whole Cholota incident,
yes,
we can't but think that there is a problem when it comes to extradition. I mean, and there was more than just the problems with extradition on Moroadi Cholota. You informed the nation that she had failed to cooperate. Turns up there was no affidavit, no formal agreement, no proper communication from the NPA. What's going on there? I mean, this was very badly mishandled.
I'm not sure where you're quoting from all of that, but there were lots of allegations that were made, but whether they were actual findings is something else. And you're right. I mean, the country, understandably, is the Gupta extradition has caused a lot of unhappiness in this country, and understandably so, because we want accountability for state capture, and it is allegedly these people that almost brought our country to its knees with state capture. And so I want to be very clear about that. The Gupta extradition process was the UAE court that decided against granting the South Africans the application for extradition. And we are still trying to understand why exactly that application was refused. We sat down with prosecutors in the UAE to make sure that our application conformed to all their requirements. And we've since then, since the judgment, we've been sending several notes verbal to properly understand the reasons for this. Because the ID is at a very advanced, that's the IDAC now, is at a very advanced stage of its investigations into the Gupta-related charges, so that we can put together a new extradition application with additional charges as well. It's at a very advanced stage. Our concern still is that we want certainty about that decision, so that when we do lodge the new application, we're not going to suffer the same fate. So that is something that we're working very, very hard on to ensure that these alleged criminals are brought back to face justice in South Africa.
Eskom, PRASA, there's so many more, Transnet. There's so many where we've looked at this, and there were huge expectations when you came in. And I think I began the conversation talking about that you would come in and restore the capability of the NPA, fast track these cases that literally brought South Africa to their knees. And here we are, still talking about the same things in a way, where we haven't seen successful prosecutions. I'm feeling that there is so much more at play here, that you would love to do your work, but you can't. Something is stopping the NPA from doing what they are meant to be doing, and I don't know if it's you.
So look, let me say this, that we have, since I took office in 2019, the perception or the understanding was that the Zondo Commission actually had given the National Prosecuting Authority a blueprint for prosecutions, which is absolutely incorrect, because the standard of that is required in a criminal trial, which is reasonable prospects of a successful prosecution, are very different from a standard that is in a commission of inquiry. And so I took office and came into a National Prosecuting Authority that had itself been captured, dealing with these issues in terms of trying to turn around the NPA. There was senior leadership that needed to be appointed that was not in place, the deputies. We went into COVID very shortly after that. And it's only after, say, in 2021, that we were really able to start trying to rebuild the capacities, capabilities, and to deal with state capture cases. And that is 4 years ago. And since then, we've had the ID that was initially formed. And the ID, being the temporary structure or unit in the NPA that it was we are not able to capacitate it in a way that would allow us to do our work. Because in government, if you do not have a permanent entity, you cannot have a permanent structure. And therefore, you cannot recruit into that structure. So the ID was depending on other government departments, like the DPCI, to actually second staff members to assist with these cases. The DPCI did help, and I'm very grateful to General Labia, who recently retired. We have a very good relationship, but the numbers that were given were very, very small. And trying to get the specialized capabilities to deal with these very, very complex cases, very expensive skills, is not easy. So we've been working really hard to capacitate, to get the right skills into the NPA to deal with this. And the IDAC last year, which was formed in August last year, which became permanent, is now we've actually worked with business in the context of the presidential initiative. And there's a digital evidence unit that's been set up in the context of this that is going to be able to do work that will help us analyze data from laptops, cell phones, this kind of digital analysis that is so critical because that's where the evidence lies today. And many of our cases, we've struggled to be able to do this kind of analysis, and that has been one of the challenges. So I accept that we haven't moved as fast as we'd like to. But if you look at all of those matters, Eskom, Transnet, there are cases in court where the CEOs, CFOs of these matters, these SOEs are in court. So I think we're one of the few countries where if you look at the high-profile nature of some of the accused in court, and I can name them, if you look at all of those cases, you'll be able to see that those are very high-profile accused persons, both in government and in the private sector. And those cases, regrettably, are proceeding in a system that sometimes takes very, very long for cases to move through a system because of various institutional challenges, Stalingrad tactics that are employed by the defense. I mean, matters in court, for example, the Transnet matter was in court earlier this year. It's been postponed to February 2026. So we're dealing with cases that are being postponed for a year and more because
of the arms deal,
congestion in courts. So I'm not trying to make excuses. I want to say these are the real challenges we're facing.
I understand, and I do understand that, and I know that there's so many details in each one of these individual cases. But I mean, I can throw names at you where this evokes a lot of emotions within South Africa. We talk about Matsela Koko, we talk about Zizi Kodwa, we talk about the Estina Dairy Farm, we talk about the Senzo Miyiwa trial, we talk about the AKA murder trial. There is so much that. The reality is South Africans are craving justice. I cannot put it in another way. And I'm sure so are you, but we feel like we're not getting it, and that's the reality. We've run out of time, but I want to ask you, you've got a few months left in office, you leave the end of January 2026. Can you leave that office feeling proud of yourself and what you've achieved? Absolutely. Or do you have time to rectify some of the wrongs that perhaps your team has done? Because I know you're facing the consequences now. That's what a leader has to do, unfortunately.
No, absolutely. I will leave office when I do. Absolutely proud of what we've achieved. I mean, sexual and gender-based violence, the Omotoso matter is one matter. If you look at the Jocelyn Smith matter and thousands of other matters where we have prosecuted complex human trafficking and other matters, we have done extremely well with that. We have set up an institution, our asset recovery, which people don't talk about much. We've recovered almost 50% of all the recoveries since the asset forfeiture unit was actually formed in 2000 has been recovered in the past 5 years. We've set up a professional unit. We have solid policies in place. We've done a lot to really reform the NPA and to turn it around. So, of course, there are challenges. There are huge challenges. And this last 10 months of my year is going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah, it is.
And so, and extremely important because as hard as this job is, and given what we've gone through now, I realize how important it is for South Africa, for us to be able to deal with these challenges, to make sure that, we do have accountability, we do have justice. So this is going to be a very busy 10 months in the last 10 months. And I certainly hope that there will be a lot more that will come through in the courts. In fact, I'm confident that there will be. And South Africans will also feel confident that we are getting to a point where there is accountability in this country.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your honesty. And we will be watching these next 10 months. And you certainly, I'm sure, are hoping that a lot more is achieved in them. The advocate, Shamila Batohi, in studio with us. She, of course, is the National Director of Public Prosecutions, speaking about matters relating to the NPA. And just a reminder again, the DA to address the NPA prosecution crisis. 9 o'clock this morning, we will cover that on the agenda. But right now, though, it's just gone 8. Let's get into our top news bulletin.